everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Orion from Dyna-Star Rocketry. Dyna-Star is actually Apogee Components mid-power rocket line, so if this looks like Apogee kits, it's because it essentially is. So let's go ahead and open this up and make sure we've got all of the components. Alright, let's find our instructions here, as it'll have a list on the front. Alright, also we got decals in there. Okay, so we're going to go through what's in the bag. Okay, we've got our body tube here. Alright, plastic nose cone. 24mm motor mount. 1/4-inch launch lug. Alright, we've got a Kevlar shock cord, a parachute kit, and then we've got a card with centering rings and a bulkhead, and then we've got fin stock here, and one of the fins has come loose. Alright, but that's all there. Okay, then we've got two motor clips and some more rings here. Okay, so it looks like, alright, so we got both D and E size engine hooks. That's interesting. And it looks like everything to build is here. So I'll put this away and we will get started in just a minute. The first thing we need to do is sand the fin stock. Now the instructions say that this is balsa. It feels a lot denser. I'm just going to peel this tape away here, but I'm going to keep the fins in the stock for the moment. Yeah, I think this is actually basswood or basswood. But regardless, we will go ahead and do some sanding here. I'm going to start with some 150 grit sandpaper on a sanding block. Now as soon as I went to flip this over, they all fell out of the stock, so we'll go ahead and finish here. Now, according to the instructions, we should go up to 400 grit sandpaper on these, but these are not balsa. All right, it says it's balsa in there. These are not. This is, I'm pretty sure this is basswood or birch, but it's definitely harder, and we don't need to really go that far with it. So the three fins here will go on the aft. And then these two are going to be the wings of our kind of space plane looking rocket here. Alright, and we need to orient these so that the grain is parallel to the leading edge. Alright, so this means this will be our leading edges here. And then these little guys here, we're going to glue to the edge like that. And for some reason, Apogee just likes doing these types of things on their mid-range kits, mid-power kits here. If I'd had my way, I would just use thin plywood and laser cut the whole thing, have done with it. But I'm not the one making this kit. Now the instructions recommend doing this on waxed paper, and I concur. This is a good way to do it. And what we'll do here, I'm not going to worry about sanding these a whole lot till I get them glued together, because I've found that a lot of times they shift while it's gluing, and you end up having to use some wood filler and things like that to fill it in anyway. Here we're going to use some wood glue. And we don't want a lot here. Alright, we just want to make a nice strong joint. We don't want a lot of excess wood glue oozing out everywhere. Okay, so just enough glue there to cover the wood. Okay, and then we're going to put that so it lines up right along the edge there. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for the other fin off camera, and I'm going to move both of these onto a flatter surface. My work mat here has a few little bumps and such in it. I'm going to move this to a completely flat surface, and then I'm also going to put some wax paper on top and put a heavy book or something on top of it, because as I said in the past with some of these kits, I've had these things twist a little bit and then you get an uneven fin. While the wings are gluing, we'll turn our attention back here to the fins themselves. And we're going to do the edges here, mainly just to knock off these little nubs here. And off camera when I was working on the wings, I did the same thing to the little attachments on the forward side, so we had good glue contact. So we're just going to go through and just do all the edges here first, stacked together. Now the instructions say at this step that we could apply sanding sealer to the fins, and if these were balsa I would do that. With these hardwood fins though, it's really not necessary, and my primer will do a good job of filling in any remaining grain. So now one of the things I thought was strange when we were going through the parts list was that they gave us 2 motor clips, but what they have is then an option here for either the quote standard hook, which is 70 millimeters long, or the E hook, which is 90 millimeters long. Now if you use the standard hook, that means for black powder engines you're going to be limited to C's and D's, but some of the composites in larger impulses will still fit. I'm going to go ahead and use the full E hook, because you can always use a little spacer with that E hook to use the C and D size motors. And so I think this just gives us a better option and more options. Okay, so to start with, we are going to simply mark one end of this as aft so we don't get it confused later. I'm just going to write that on the inside. And then from the aft end, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch. And this will be where one of the centering ring goes, it looks like. And then at 3 1/4 inches, I need to get the right rule here. So 3 1/4 will be right there. Okay, and that looks like all we need there. Now I've deliberately offset these 2 marks so that when we put the engine clip on, it doesn't hide this lower mark. So up at the upper mark there, we're going to make a little slit. just wide enough for our clip to go in. So that will go in there like that. Okay, and hangs over a bit. Okay, we're going to need a thrust ring here. So they gave us 4 rings, 3 of which are a bit bigger. This is our thrust ring or engine block. That's just going to go right down in here. Now I'm going to do this a little bit differently than the way they show. And so typically when you're putting something into a tube, we put the glue inside the tube. And that's pretty standard. But with engine blocks, I don't want to push glue down behind it where it could interfere with the motor. So in this case, I actually prefer to put the glue on the ring. Now the one thing you have to watch with this is sometimes that paper starts expanding right away and you may have trouble getting it in there. Which is probably why most people still do it the other way. Alright, we're just going to stick that in and just set that, it's hanging there right on the engine hook, and we just want to adjust it so that it has an equal spacing all the way around and it's not tilted down inside. Okay, and I'm just going to wipe that excess away for now. Okay, and I'm just going to let that dry for a few minutes, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to find the rest of these rings. So on this cardstock, we've got 2 centering rings, and they're just being held in here by this masking tape. So we'll just carefully remove that. And try to keep it from peeling off the finished surface. And then the last one back here is a bulkhead. We'll go ahead and take it off right now. But we'll set that aside. That'll go up in the payload section. Actually, this one doesn't have a payload section. That may just be an extra ring that they make for lots of kits. Okay, they've got very sticky masking tape there, and it really wants to pull the finish off. Okay, so we need those 2 rings. And then we've also got these 3 rings here. The green rings, it looks like they're using those to reinforce the centering rings and also to help keep the hooks in place. Okay, so coming back here, there is a little tiny notch that can be taken out of these rings here, and so I'm just going to pop that out with my knife. Sometimes they just plop out without a lot of resistance. Okay, and I'm just going to dry fit this initially. Okay, I had a little bit of a video snafu, and when I thought I was shooting, I really wasn't. So what I've done here is I've placed one of the large rings at that 1/2 inch mark that we made and glued that into place. And then I made another mark 1/2 inch forward of the original one and taken one of these green rings and glued that into place. And so these are holding our clip into place there. And then now what we're going to do is tie the shock cord onto the onto the motor mount tube, excuse me. And to do that, I first cut a little notch on the inside of one of these green rings, about halfway through the thickness. Okay, and then over here we've got our shock cord. And on both ends of these, I have applied a little bit of super glue to keep them from fraying. And now I'm going to tie this on. Now it also says to make a mark 1/2 inch from the forward end of the body tube, and that's where this ring is going to go. But in our case here with the E-clip, that is 1/2 inch there. So I'm just going to tie the shock cord onto my motor mount tube with the double knot here. Some people just like to use a slip knot so they can apply tension to it. It won't matter, we're going to embed all this in glue anyway. I'm going to put this on, slide the whole shock cord through that green ring. Okay, and now the shock cord itself is going to pass through that little notch as we put it on, like that. Now you see my knot's trying to come undone, but that's okay, we're going to glue it here in a moment. Alright, so I'm going to bring that down to just over the clip there. So I'm basically bringing it so the clip is right there. Okay, I'm going to move that up just a bit. I'm going to slide back down into that after I put glue on here. Now I'm going to use quite a bit because I'm going to embed the Kevlar into that glue. And that'll basically hold it there forever. The motor mount will deteriorate before that's going to come loose. Alright, so I'm going to push this back again. Alright, and pull up on the shock cord. And I'm just going to run that glue all the way around. And then I'm going to take the other large white ring. Okay, I'm going to take out that little notch right there. Okay, and we're going to thread shock cord through that as well. And then that is going to go here. I'm just going to dry fit it first to make sure we do fit, and we do. Okay, and just like I did with this one, I'm going to just run a bead of glue along here. Alright, I'm going to hold on to the shock cord and just kind of pull this down. Alright, and it's going to form its own little fillet right there. We can smooth it around. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing over here. Smooth that one in. Alright, and so now we've got a very strong motor mount there and shock cord anchor. And I'm going to set that aside to completely dry. Here I've accumulated several parts in different stages. So here my wings have been glued together, but when we put them together here they should be completely flat, and they're not. We've got a little bit of interning here, but we'll fix that with a little bit of sanding a little bit later on. Okay, my motor mount and shock cord mount are finished, and according to the instructions they want us to glue this into the body tube now. I'm going to delay that for just a bit until after we mark the body tube, but I will prepare this by feeding the shock cord down through the forward end and out the aft end there, and that'll just keep it out of the way for when we do need to glue it. I'm going to set that aside. All right, next we need to mark the body tube for the fins and the launch lug. So the first thing I'm going to do here is mark aft in one end of this so I don't get it turned around later. All right, and then we're going to find our tube marking guide. Here we go. Alright, so this is on its own piece of paper here. Okay, so you don't have to worry about cutting this out and losing part of the instructions. This is also kind of neat. I don't think I've ever seen this in an instruction sheet before, but they give us templates for the fins in case you break one and you need to replace it. For now, we'll just go ahead and cut out the tube marking guide here. You can use scissors or you can use a hobby knife and a ruler like this. And if you want to keep this whole sheet intact, you can go ahead and make a photocopy of it and then cut up the photocopy. Alright, so we're going to wrap this around the aft end and give ourselves a little bit of room there at the end. So don't make this flush. We want some room to mark on both sides of it. And take just a little bit of masking tape here and put that together. And I'm also going to take another piece of the less sticky kind here. And I'm just going to put that there so the guide does not move around on me. Okay, and then we're just going to mark here at each arrow point. Let's make a little tick mark. But I'm going to mark on here whether it's a fin with an F, a wing with a W, okay, and this is a fin. Alright, now things get a little crowded over here, so we're going to have another wing, and then the launch lug, and another fin. Now once you have those marked, you can take this to a window frame, or a door frame, or a drawer edge. You can use some angled metal. I am going to use my Estes tube marking guide here. Alright. And this is just a whole bunch of straight edges at different levels. And so depending on how big your tube is, you can rotate this around. Now let's check our instructions again and see how far these need to go up. Okay, it looks like they have us going all the way down the body tube length, which is fine. You can erase them later. Alright, let's see here. Okay, so I'm just going to go to each set of tick marks and align them, and then I'm just going to draw a line all the way down. Okay, so there's one of my fin lines. I'm going to go ahead and draw this out maybe up here where I can see it better. So I'm just going to put fin right there. Now the reason I wanted to do this before I put the motor mount in was that I like to align the motor retention clip with the launch lug so it kind of stays out of the way on the launch pad. Alright, and now I'm just going to wind up my shock cord around my fingers here so I can stuff it inside. So here I'm just going to put this inside the motor mount. Alright, kind of stuff it in both ends so I don't get glue on it. Okay, let's come back to our diagram here. Alright, so in this case, our motor mount is supposed to stick out a little bit, about 5/8 of an inch or about 16 millimeters. Basically what they're showing here is that the aft centering ring is going to be just inside the body tube here. Alright, now go ahead and dry fit yours like I am, and what I'm finding is it's stuck. Okay, in fact that's very stuck. Okay, so we are going to need to do some sanding here, and notice I kind of weakened that there. I'm going to add a little bit more glue to reinforce that. Okay, what this is telling me though is that there's quite a bit greater diameter to these rings than the body tube is. Alright, so I'm going to give that some reinforcement there on both sides of that weak spot. Alright, now I'm going to take some 150 grit sandpaper and I'm just going to sand these rings a bit. And it's probably going to take a little while here, and I need to do both of them. Okay, one more time here. Still a bit snug. Okay, finally we're there. Now through the magic of digital imagery here, you're seeing this out of order. What you're about to see in the next clip pertains to how to glue in the motor mount here. And in the Peregrine clip that you're going to see, they want the motor mount tube to be flush with the body tube. Okay, for the Orion though, if you look at the directions, right, what they want to have here is the centering ring on the aft end should be just inside the main body tube there. Now in this next illustration it shows it a little bit deeper, but to get the clearance that they want here, so 5/8 of an inch or about 16 millimeters, that's being measured from the body tube to the end of the motor mount tube. You have to pretty much do what I did here. Now you can bring it in just a little bit, so if you prefer a little bit more of a lip along the body tube, you can put a few millimeters inward here. Okay, but then what you're going to see here is a means of measuring how far to put the glue in, and in this case you want to make that measurement from the forward ring to the aft ring, not the forward ring to the aft part of the body tube. Okay, I'm going to go back to the other clip now, and then we'll catch this all back up in just a few minutes. Now when this is installed, it's going to be flush with the body tube, and so I'm going to measure here just using a cotton applicator about where that's going to be. Alright, and then I'm going to back it off. So here's my thumb here. I'm going to back that off a bit so that when I put glue in here, that ring will go through it. So once again, we'll take some glue. And then using my thumbnail as a depth guide here, I'm just going to put that in and then go all the way around here. Check down inside, it needs some more. Okay, now I'm going to partially put this in, not up till the glue yet, and I'm going to put another ring of glue just inside where that other ring is going to be. So it doesn't have to be quite on the edge, but near it. Alright, then we're going to go ahead and slide this in. You want to do that fairly quickly so the glue does not grab. my motor mount is drying, I'm going to come back to our wings here. I'm going to stack those together, and now I'm going to drag them across some 150 grit sandpaper. And the idea is to even these out. Alright, so I'm putting most of the pressure on the forward edge there, because that's the part that has moved. Okay, those are getting closer. Now here we may want to do one at a time. Oh, well. Alright, so now we get to re-glue that and maybe get it closer to what it should be anyway. Okay, we'll go ahead and do this one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go re-glue this one, and we'll come back and continue sanding these as needed. I have my fin re-glued, and I've sanded these again to get them pretty close to straight there. We may have to do a little bit of fine adjustment when we're ready to put them on the body tube. I'm going to take my 320 grit sandpaper here and just do a light sanding here to even out any glue from that seam and just kind of smooth it all in here. Now, nowhere in the instructions is it telling us to round or airfoil any of these surfaces, and that may be intentional just because of the nature of the kit, where it's supposed to look like a futuristic space plane here, and they may just be keeping this squared off. And I have seen where Apogee, at least for their display models, often does not streamline or otherwise round these because they photograph better when they're squared off. I'm just going to leave these squared off and maybe just give them a little bit of sanding here to make sure we've got all the nubbins down. Just due to the nature of this model, it's not going to be setting altitude and speed records anyway. Alright, so I'm just going to make these all uniformly square. Okay. Now, I don't see any reason why you couldn't round these or taper them however you like. It's just not indicating to do so in the instructions. So we're going to move on to the fins here. And it doesn't mention it in the instructions, but I would recommend using a fin alignment guide. These are two that Apogee makes for BT70 tubes, which is what this is. So we'll use the 3-fin configuration for putting on the aft fins, and then the 4-fin we'll just use 2 of the opposing fins here to put the wings on. I'm ready to attach the fins, and these are going to go the opposite of what you think they should. So with the grain going like this, you would think this is the leading edge, but it's not. Okay, so it's this more blunt edge here is our leading edge, and the trailing edge will be flush with the body tube there. Now I'm going to mark that with my thumb here in just a moment. We're going to attach, but I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper and just roughen up along that line, just a stroke or two here, and that'll give it a better surface for the glue to adhere to. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do these other ones too, just use a fin here as a bit of a guide. Okay, now we're going to take some glue. Now in the instructions, they recommend using a thin layer of glue like I'm going to do here. They say we should allow this to dry for 5 minutes to get tacky. And in my experience, that is too long of a duration. It will get tacky, but it'll actually start to get too dry. Okay. So while it's still liquid, I'm going to apply this to my fin line. We'll pull that back off. And now I'm going to wait for about 30 seconds for both sides to get tacky, and then we'll come back. About a minute has passed, and so I'm going to go ahead and put my fin back where I had it here. All right, and the glue is tacky, so that now as we press this on, it should stick there of its own volition. All right, and I'm going to sight down the tube here and the fin, make sure that everything's aligned. It's just a little bit off here. I'm going to straighten that out. Okay. And we're going to repeat this process all the way around. So let this fin dry for about 10 minutes or so. And I'm also going to now use my fin alignment guide. Okay, so I'm just going to run this down. And this will help keep that straight as well. And then I'll do the other two fins off camera. A thought just came to me that the 5-minute tacky time that they're using in the instructions probably would work if you're using white glue like Elmer's. The glue on the fins has dried. And it's all looking pretty good. We'll sight down the tube here. Okay, so next we're going to put the wings on. And these need to be 5.5 inches from the aft end. So we'll find my wing lines here. Okay, so I'm just going to make a little tick mark right there. And come around to the other side and do the same thing. And now I'll just take one of the wings here and use it as a measuring guide in the same way that we did with the fins. So we'll take that distance there and just, again, roughen it with a little bit of sandpaper. Okay, and then we'll come around to the other side. Do that same thing again here. Okay, now like we did with the fins, we're going to put a even bead of glue onto the wing. I'm going to briefly touch that down, bring that back up, add just a little bit more glue in here. Alright, let's do that one more time. Alright, now I'm going to let this get tacky for 30 to 60 seconds and we'll come back. My glue has become tacky, and so now I'm going to put this back on. Okay, press it down firmly here. Make sure everything stays aligned. Okay, and we can sight down this, and it's going to get a little confusing in a bit here with all these fins. Okay, and here again we can use a fin alignment guide here. You'll need to use the 4-fin one if you're using the Apogee guides. Alright, so we'll just slide that up in there. And then just like we did with the aft fins, I'm going to let this dry for about 10 minutes or so and then go on to the next one. I'll do that off camera. The wing glue is now dry as well, and our next thing to put on is the launch lug. Now in the instructions it has us go ahead and put the fillets on the fins first. I prefer just to do all of my fillets at the same time, so I'm going to put this on first. And this is going to go along our launch lug line here and flush with the aft edge of the wing there. Okay. Now if you put this right on the line, you're going to have a little gap in there. I'm just going to put it right along the inside corner edge there of the wing, so it's tucked up against there, which will reinforce both the wing and the launch lug. So we'll put this on in a similar fashion to what we used for the fins and wings, except we really don't need to wait for it to get tacky, since there's not going to be a lot of leverage on this. I'm going to use a little bit more glue to make sure we get a good solid fill in this corner here. Okay, and the other nice thing about doing it this way, as long as your wing is on straight, your launch lug will also be on straight. Okay, so we're just going to hold that there for a few seconds, and then once it tacks itself into place there, we'll just let that dry for about 20 minutes or so. The glue on my launch lug is dry, and so we're ready to put the fillets on. And I'm going to string this back up through the body tube here. Take it off the camera view so I can look down at myself. The hardest part is just getting it past the thrust ring. Now, if you're having trouble getting it down, one of the things you can do is take a pencil or a pen that's got a clip on it like this. You can just kind of clip that on. You can use that to drop down through the body tube here. There we go. Alright, now I'm just going to gather this up, put it back inside the body tube. A lot of work just to get this thing back in there. Alright, and I'm just going to take a paper towel here and kind of loosely crumple it. And that'll just keep it from falling out while we're trying to work here. Now I'm going to keep my other paper towel sitting here so that I can wipe my fingers on it. We're going to do a whole bunch of glue fillets now. And as long as you keep the rocket fairly horizontal, you can do all of them at once. You don't want to tip it up on one end or the other, or the fillets will tend to run toward gravity. So I prefer to do opposing fillets at the same time, like this. Okay, and then just take a finger here, smooth that in and wipe off the excess. Alright, and if you get glue in places you don't want it, the faster you take it out, the less noticeable it's going to be. And we'll just do this all around the fins, the wings, and the launch lug. Alright, and then finally here in front of the launch lug, I'm making a very small fillet because I don't want anything to impede the launch rod as it goes through there. Okay, but now I can just let this dry horizontally, and we will come back when everything is dried. Now, just as I was putting this up to dry, I had a thought. Since we've got this launch lug under the wing, and it's there for a functional purpose, but if I take another launch lug of the same size, I can put it under the other wing and give it more of an aesthetic here. Those are both the same. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this right into the fillet. In the same spot there. And fortunately that side of that wing side had a small fillet to begin with. And now I'm just going to add some more glue to that. Alright, so it makes it a bit more purpose-built looking, so that the two lugs become more of the aesthetic of the rocket and not just a functional item. Alright, now you don't have to do this, and if you don't have an extra launch lug, that'll certainly make it more difficult. Alright, back to drying. While the fillets are drying, I'm going to turn my attention to the nose cone. And this is the same nose cone that Apogee uses in a lot of their mid-power BT70 kits. It's the same one that the Peregrine Jr. has. I think it's also the same one that the Zephyr Jr. has. And one of the things that I've found in all these is they have these two rings molded into it. And I don't know if those are supposed to be there as an aesthetic or if it's just part of the molding process. But in the illustrations, both in the instruction manual and on the packaging, it does not show these. So for this kit, I'm going to go ahead and sand them down. At the same time, I'm going to sand the seams here and knock those down a bit. I'm not going to go so far as to fill them in, though you can using plastic model putty. But I'm just going to start moving over here and getting these rings knocked down. Alright, so that's knocked down most of the big stuff there. I can still see a little bit of those rings and a little bit of seam here. But I think once I finish and use a filling primer on this, that should take care of most of it. I'm going to go off camera now and continue sanding this with 220 grit and then 320 grit sandpaper. But I'm going to wet sand those, and I can't do that under the camera very easily. So I'm going to go finish sanding this, and then I'll come back. Here I've finished wet sanding the nose cone, and you can still see a little bit of the seam there and a little bit of where those rings were, but I think after this has been primed a couple of times and resanded, those should all go away. So I'll take this aside and start its priming and painting. The other thing we can do while we're waiting for glue is assemble the parachute. Now this comes as a big sheet that you can cut into either a 32 or a 24-inch parachute. This does not indicate which size we're supposed to use. Okay, so I'm going to assume we need the 24-inch. 32 inches seems awfully big for this rocket. So we're just going to open this up. This is going to take up a whole lot of space. Okay, so we need to cut along this inner line here. You can find that sweet spot in your scissors. Now that the chute is cut out, we're going to apply these reinforcements, and they'll just go over the appropriate shaped areas in the corners here. And then next you can just use a pencil and poke a hole through here, and do that for each one as well. Next we're going to take this thread, and there's quite a bit of it here, and part of the trick is unraveling it without tying knots in it here. So first thing to do is just carefully unfold all of this. And we're going to cut this into 4 equal lengths. So it looks like they've at least tried to make this into 2 halves here already, just the way it's folded. So we'll see how close they are. About a foot difference. So the first thing I'm going to do is hold this by the 2 free ends here. I'm just going to make those equal. Alright, and then we go down the length of the line here. Alright, then we get to these 2 ends that we'll just cut that loop. So now I have 2 equal sizes here. So I'll come back to the other free ends. Okay, so now we'll put all these together. Alright, and then once more we're going to go through the entire length here. Okay, and we end up with those 2 loops, and we can cut them. So now I have 4 pieces that are the same length, and now we're just going to tie each one to 2 adjacent holes here. Okay, and the main thing here is try to keep the amount of string that you use about equal for each one. Alright, we're going to tie a double knot here. Okay, and then move to an adjacent one, which will be right here, and do the same thing. Alright, and then we just continue this all the way around with the other 3 pieces of string. Something else we can do while we're waiting for glue to dry is to cut out the nozzle here. Now this is not required for flight. This is just an accessory to make it look a little cooler. Alright, so we're just going to cut this out of the cardboard stock. Now the instructions should suggest bending this over a corner here. So I'll move my camera a little bit so you can see the corner of my table. All right, and what we're going to do is just pull down on it as we kind of curve it around. This is just going to impart some curvature to it and make it easier to glue together eventually here. And you can do this multiple times to make it curvier. Alright, but we're going to glue it together like this. And then the last green ring that we have here is going to go inside of it. And then this will fit over the motor mount tube. And so even if the motor's installed, you'll be able to fly it with this in place. And depending on how you make it, you could also make this removable, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Okay, so we've got that part there. I'm going to get a little bit of masking tape handy. And then I'm going to get my glue here. Now I'm going to do this kind of like I do with fins. I'm going to let the glue get tacky a little bit. Alright, so we'll put a little glue on there. Okay, get a nice even, get it right in my fingers again. Get an even spread, and now we're going to put this on. Okay, so that both sides now have glue. And I'm going to let this sit here for about a minute to get tacky. About a minute has passed, and so now I'm going to take my glue and put it back together here again. All right, and line everything up the way it should be. All right, that is tacky. It's grabbing really well. A little bit too well. We need to move that down. About there. Okay, and I'm going to put this little bit of masking tape on just to hold that in place while the glue dries. Now this will stick down inside there once it's fully dry. But we also need to cut a notch in this so that the engine clip can freely move. So we want to cut about halfway through the thickness of the ring. Okay, it looks like I need a little more, and it's better just to do this a few layers at a time than trying to get it all at once and then accidentally cutting through it. It's not the end of the world if you do cut through it, it just may be a little bit harder to assemble. Okay, I'm going to go with that. Once again, we need to let the glue dry.